What is the most common misconception people have about ABM? All right. Okay. Before I answer this question, what is the most common misconception about people have with ABM? The most common question that comes to me about ABM is like, what is ABM? That is the most common question I get, and that too, even from seasoned salespeople, I've heard, I've heard this question. Seasoned businessmen, entrepreneurs, they ask me this question. Hey, Ritesh, you know what? I have heard this term all across, but what really is ABM? So let me explain what ABM is, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about the misconception. So account-based marketing is basically marketing for the accounts, right? So if you're selling a pencil, then all the people who are going to use a pencil is your target market, right? Which is practically everybody in your city or on your country or in this planet. Almost all of it, not all of it. But the market is huge, right? Okay. If you're selling pizza, then all the pizza eaters around that particular area is your target market. So the market, I'm talking from the consumer point of view. That is what most people understand. But if the account itself, if a company itself becomes a market, then we call it account-based marketing. For example, you are selling a Microsoft product, right? Or you have developed a product or a service for Microsoft, right? Which is like an add-on which will work on top of Microsoft products, and then it can go on along with the products that Microsoft already has. Now, what you need to do is you need to go ahead and sell it to Microsoft. Now, Microsoft has hundreds of thousands of people working for the company, right? You need to find the right decision makers, and there can be multiple layer of decision makers. So there's an account which is Microsoft. It's a huge account, okay, and it has got the decision maker, and that's your potential target customer. So when the account itself become a market, so since Microsoft is so huge, that means if you strike one deal with Microsoft, the deal will run into millions and maybe tens of millions or hundreds of millions of dollars, right? So the account itself is so big that it becomes a market, right? So, and then you have to do marketing to that particular account, right? So that is where the ABM terms comes, account-based marketing. That means the market is the account. And when you do a marketing to an account, it becomes account-based marketing. So that's the definition of ABM according to me. Of course, there are different definitions floating around. What is the most common misconception? The most common misconception is, people think account-based marketing means just make a list of 10 companies or 100 companies and find the CEOs of that company and start shooting email. I think that's a misconception. That is not, they're just a very surface level ABM, right? Typically, for large accounts, the CEOs are very busy people and they're not the real decision makers, right? Maybe they are the ones who actually sign the check at the end, but they are not really, in many ways, the decision makers are very different people. For example, if you're trying to sell an IT product, then possibly the decision makers will be the project managers and the IT managers, right? And the network managers and the database administrators and like so on. So you've got to understand who the decision makers are, who the real users are, who the influencers are, and who's going to, who the obstacle creators are, and who's the one who's going to actually pay sign the check, right? So typically these are very different people. And when you have a product or service, and if you know that, okay, fine, these are the 100 companies that is potentially my customer, are just making a list of all the CEOs and top level CXO level people, and then just bombarding them with an email is not going to help, because those people may not be using your product. They may not be even the decision makers. They may not be even aware of the need or the problem that their company might be having, right? So the need, and you've got to really find out that who are the decision makers and who are the end users. Maybe you can start with bottom up. Find the end users, give them the product and service for them to use, and then they can, in turn, convince their decision makers and influencers to go ahead and take your product. Or you have to, to go to the decision makers and convince them to take these better decisions. Or you've got to do both. But generally, just making a list of top level CXO and sending a LinkedIn message and email is not a very good idea for most cases. Okay, that this is only for big enterprises with large budgets. Yeah, that's another misconception. Conception. In 2025, ABM can be used by startups. It is being used by startups. It is being used by small businesses. So it is not just a gameplay of large enterprise businesses, right? So account-based marketing is something that there are so many tools in tech available, and thanks to the AI and the AI agents and the automations, even a small startup or a small business can run a very successful account-based marketing, and in many ways disrupt the market, right? If you have the right kind of strategy, if you know what you're selling, and if you know who you want to sell, then the data, the research, the technology, the systems are now cheap enough, cost effective enough, and readily accessible enough for even a one-person company or a 10-person companies to run a highly successful account-based marketing. So it is not just for big enterprises anymore. The technology alone can make ABM successful. Yeah, the technology itself is not alone, right? Just because you have taken a Salesforce and a HubSpot subscription, and you have bought a list, you downloaded a list from ZoomInfo, is not going to be enough for you to succeed in ABM, right? It's not just about, hey, gather the ICPs, gather the list, make a list, upload into HubSpot or an outbound tool, and then just start shooting emails or LinkedIn messages. It's not going to be enough. Technology is not enough. And I have seen a lot of companies making a mistake of thinking that if they have the right technology in place, they're going to succeed. Now, even with all the technology, all the cutting edge technology, and the systems in place, the campaigns may still fail because maybe your message is not resonating, right? Maybe you're not reaching out to the right audience. Maybe you are not reaching out with the right audience with the right message, right? Maybe your offer is not good enough. So at the core of it, this is the sales, right? So businesses need to understand that technology is not going to offset the basic principles of sales, right? The basic principles of sales is that there's a problem and you have a solution, or there is a need and you have a product, or you have a product which is going to disrupt the way that the things are being done. If it does not fall into one of these categories, if the messaging is not right, if you're not reaching into the right audience, if the strategy is not if the strategy is not carved out in the right way, then no amount of technology and data is going to help you, right? So please do work on the strategy first. Please hire a strategist, or you should have a strategist in place. A lot of businesses I see, they just say, hey, you want to start ABM and outreach, right? And then they will start looking for a freelancer or an agency who can do outreach. Now the agency and or the freelancer will set up the systems and can do the outreach, but they are not going to form a strategy for you, right? The strategy is something that you need to form, and maybe you can hire consultants and others as well. But at the end of the day, that responsibility, that onus falls under you, right? So, and many businesses, they just blame the agency for not bringing in the result. They hire some agencies or freelancers, and then they run the campaigns for 3 months and 6 months, and then they will simply say, hey, you know what, outreach does not work, or ABM does not work. No, outreach works, ABM works. It works for others, right? It's not just working for you. So before the technology, the strategy is something that needs to be worked on. All right.